So we're ready.
Should we go ahead? It's exactly. All right, okay. We'll call to order the Planning Commission regular meeting for Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024. Roll call.
Chuck Howard.
Here.
Don Reimer.
Here.
Vice Chair Ursula Kruzalegi.
Here.
Kent Slaymaker. Chair Cindy Olsen.
Here.
Jefferson Litch.
Here.
Okay, approval of the agenda. If everybody's in favor, let's switch A and B around where we can do the public hearing first on the rezoning of 2060 Minor Street, the visitor center, and then we'll do the public hearing on ADA. You guys are agreeing with that. So can we have a motion with that change? Approve the agenda?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, move that we change the agenda to do the public hearing for conditional use permit and change that to the public hearing of the rezoning of 2060 Minor Street, the visitor center.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, approval of the minutes from March 6th, 2024. I didn't find anything. I was looking for the O-Ns and the E-Ns.
No, I auto check that every time. That will never happen on my watch ever. Or chairman either. So I check for that also.
Okay, do we have approval of the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes of the March 6th Planning Commission meeting. Oh, I have one change.
Do a second first. Say, we need a second first.
Oh, okay, I'll second it.
Okay, now discussion.
The part about the speed bump on 10th Avenue, it reads 10th Avenue and Minor, it should be 10th Avenue and the alley.
Did you get that, Linda?
Yeah, I was just wondering what that alley is called. It's not Center Alley, right? Is
I
it
don't think
Idaho
it's-
or?
I don't think it's not even a street sign, it's the alley.
So just say on 10th needs a speed bump.
Yeah. Center alley would be the place to put it, that's the center of it.
Noted. I'll make that change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor? Motion carries. Okay, any conflict of interest with today's meeting? Just going through. Okay, we'll move on to the next. Any public comment from the audience or online? We open it where if they want to make a public comment at this point in a meeting, they can.
Nobody online and
Nobody signed up.
Okay. Staff update.
sure, so I have a couple of updates just about things that are, you might have seen around town or maybe not. The Block 57 Gold Digger Field project that you would have heard a while ago, they've applied for grading and excavation permits,
Oh.
so we're still working towards some other items, but they're making progress, so you might see that before too long, started in earnest.
Is that
Um,
considered breaking ground?
I think so.
Literally.
Well, yeah,
It'll be site work.
Yeah.
So improvements, maybe a minor street, which is part of the project requirements, and there's quite a bit of site work that needs to be
So it's
done
not
before they come
considered
out of
breaking
the ground.
ground?
Yeah, so it's not actually vertical construction, as they call it, there's a lot of,
there's
pipes
still,
and
yeah, a couple of
utilities.
things ongoing, like a bit finalizing and executing the public improvements agreements and building permits and the like, but site work is still positive
Yep,
progress. Another update would be that city council recently designated the Indian Hot Springs as a local historic sites. Also working on reestablishing sites and facilities, to manage city-owned properties. The Virginia Canyon Mountain Park, an update from last meeting where we recommended approval of that access trail, that was approved at council, so work is ongoing up there, spring. Sometime this spring, the trail, first downhill trail should be open. Then I'm thinking of scheduling a few things for next month's work session, including the standards and regulations for hotels and motels that we've talked about previously. A couple of things I want to get up to speed on for background that was talked about, but I think we're pretty well ready to start that again. So I'll plan to just bring sort of my initial thoughts so that we can have that discussion.
do we want to do that as a work session? You're talking the first of the month, or do we want to have another work session like during this month? To keep it moving forward, because if we just go month to month, we don't seem to get moving on it very fast. Or get very far.
Well.
I mean, I'm not opposed to us having another meeting this month to try to get the ball rolling on that since it's a work session. And then if something does come up for that first meeting of the month, we still have our regular meeting.
Do you anticipate any items coming up for hearing in that meeting in May?
Well, off the top of my head, I don't know whether anything will be ready for that meeting. I guess that could change between now and 3 weeks from now, but right now, there's nothing that I'm anticipating for May, so I'm certainly open to scheduling kind of a special work session.
Well, I'd just like to see us move forward on it. We've had several meetings on it and then it gets pushed to the side.
Right,
Where if we could really get moving on it. One of the things is a lot of the questions we have, like different things like the lodging tax. How can we do that? How can we change that? We don't seem to get those answers when we have the meeting. So if we could even come up with some of those questions beforehand, so we can have the answers at that work session, might move it along forward more quickly.
right.
Okay, so if anybody's got some questions on it or things that we want the answers to when we do that work session, if we could get those questions to Dylan, and then he can, whether he's gotta go through Nick or whatever.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful for me is, like, I have some ideas based on past conversations and then doing some research from other communities that are kind of working on similar things and have some standards in place, so. But the more that I have ahead of time, certainly the more beneficial the conversations can be, and maybe get it so that it's ready to go to council in, June or something like that.
Well,
Maybe not, but just to, really get the ball rolling, I think I'd contemplate a just discussion first and then maybe craft proposed code language things, so maybe that would be in June, and then
Okay.
see from there.
So any questions that somebody has, like mine is the lodging tax and, how does that work when you have dorm style living? Where does that, or right now, or, you know, those, well, we don't need to discuss those right now,
I
but
think that's a great idea. Yeah, if you could just email those or
Okay.
call Dylan with those questions, that will really help us with that work
okay.
session.
And anybody else that comes up with some, if you remember some of the questions we had on like square footage of a room, fire codes, all those different things, where if we have answers at that meeting, it would move it along a lot better.
And if it would be helpful, I can dig up some of the meeting minutes from those. Not that we have minutes from work session, I suppose, but I can get some notes
Any
and
notes.
whatnot, and send those out in the next week or
Okay.
two, if we're planning on the May 1st work
Okay.
session rather than an earlier one.
That's fine.
Just so
Give
it
some
can
time.
kind of get everyone thinking again and get you up to speed, Jefferson, a little bit. And, you know, I'm still getting up to speed a little bit on the past conversations, but it seems like a good one to start moving on. Another one that kind of potentially works with that is, we received a draft, I guess you could say, code audit of housing, as part of the multi-jurisdictional housing authority and IHOP grant work that's been ongoing. The consultant has prepared like a draft analysis of the code. And so I'm anticipating that coming, like final version coming relatively soon. I don't know exactly how quick the turnaround would be, but once that happens, kind of doing like a work session presentation, I guess, of that. And then maybe get moving on implementation of some of those things. Those kind of maybe play together a little bit since they're all to do with housing seasonally, long-term, all of that. And the final thing would be our, you know, as you know, we've done several annexations over the last couple of years, but we've not updated our 3-mile area plan that technically state statute says are supposed to be updated annually. The 3-mile plan we've been using is from 2008.
Whoa.
So I'd like to review that, get an updated map, and then bring that as an item in the next month or maybe June, depending on how quickly we can put the maps together to start analyzing future, you know, updating that. And then it's probably a somewhat larger update since it's been a long time, but then from there on out, it would be really minor every year, I would think. But staying on top of that seems important. So that's pretty much all I have, unless anyone has questions about staff update type
Well, do you
things.
want to touch on the comp plan, your thoughts on that?
Sure. It had been budgeted to kind of kick off comp planning this year. I think I'd still like to just kind of do something to prep for updating the comprehensive plan. The current one's from 2017. So at the very least, we need to revisit it and see what goals have been achieved, what is missing that needs to be added and all of that, and then determine whether it would be kind of a full rewrite of the code, comprehensive plan, or just like a partial, like an update. I don't know exactly what might be able to be done this year versus really starting in, you know, earnest to get the ball rolling, but it seems like something that in the next 12 months, you know, getting some good headway on that would be beneficial. And I think there's some grant opportunities to start with planning and implementation of that. So that's something to start pursuing. So I'll maybe prepare some stuff on that. And if anyone has thoughts on kickoff or needs and all of that, please do share.
Are you guys looking at Dylan doing that or outsourcing that?
Great question. I think a combination. I think Dylan can certainly get it started and get some of the conversation started, you know, analyzing what we currently have and maybe areas. One area that really needs to be beefed up that we talked about is the housing section. You know, with all the attention about housing now and some of the incentives, if we adopt certain policies, regulations that kind of facilitate more affordable housing, then we can be eligible for some grant funding to help us address that problem. So that's probably one of the more pressing things that we would like to address in the comp plan. But we do need to assess whether we need as Dylan said, whether the total will be right or whether we're just gonna update the code, the one we have, and that's, we need to have some good discussion with planning commission about how you feel about the plan today.
Yeah, and I think if it's a full rewrite, I don't know, maybe that it's probably a lot of work for the one planner for the city, but if it's a update to the existing code, it's a lot more manageable. So kind of figuring out what the full scope of the work will look like, maybe will help guide our decisions on how we undertake it, but
Makes sense.
I'd like to be certainly involved in the process regardless.
Okay, any questions from anyone else? Okay, then we'll go on to new business. Okay. There are two public hearings to be held tonight. One is for the consideration of the conditional use permit request for employee rafting submitted by applicant Duke Bradford of ADA Rafting and Ziplining. The first hearing is the rezoning hearing for the 2060 Minor Street Visitor Center from zoning designation P, Parks and Recreation, to C, Commercial 1. The Planning Commission is required to conduct a hearing on the CUP application and the rezoning. The commission will decide to either recommend approval or disapproval on both items during tonight's meeting. These are formal public hearings. We will require testimony to be given under oath. We will not follow any formal rules of evidence. If there is a question about the admissibility of evidence or testimony, I will make a ruling on that as chair. After I open each hearing, I will invite city staff to give a presentation. Then the applicant or property owner interested parties will be invited to present evidence and or testimony. Then the members of the public will be invited to give evidence and testimony. City staff and the applicant or property owner interested parties may respond to public testimony. Finally, the applicant or property owner interested parties will be given the opportunity to have the last word on any matter raised during the public hearing. Throughout this process, commissioners may ask questions. Okay, after the hearing is closed, the commission will begin its deliberation and make a decision. We will do this by motion. There are suggested motions in the staff report. If we cannot reach a decision tonight, we could also continue one or both matters. Okay, any questions on the process? This is good, kind of goes over it for everybody. Okay, so I'm going to open the public hearing at 6:17 for the rezoning designation P, Parks and Recreation, to C, Commercial District for 2060 Minor Street, also known as the Visitor Center. We'll start with the staff report.
Okay, so I'll start with a little bit of background and then just gonna share up here so that folks who are on can kind of, see what there's key points. So essentially, this is city initiated rezoning of the visitor center parcel, and is somewhat my fault, I guess, because I was reviewing the zoning for this property and realized it was zoned Parks and Recreation. Reason for that is kind of historical in nature. This historically had tennis courts, parks and recreation facilities, and had a swimming pool. They were all part of CRC Park essentially, and the plat for this is actually CRC Park Subdivision Lot 2. Now in 1992, we started the process to build what's now the structure for the visitor center, and didn't change the zoning. It's been Parks and Recreation for the whole 30+ years that the visitor center has been operating. But in review of the Parks and Recreation zoning district, that's not changing, which is a shame, but I'll just do it from. It's fine. So essentially, the Parks and Recreation District really only allows parks and recreation use, cemetery, golf course, playground, public park, and public recreation center. So I ran this past Carmen and Nick and said, there must be a reason why it's still Parks and Recreation zoning. Really, I think what we determined was it's kind of an oversight, and those truly are the only things that are allowed. So visitor center is not, or community center is not technically allowed in Parks and Recreation, nor are with the visitor center, gift shop or the small office uses that have been permitted above the visitor center. And so staff feels that rezoning it to C1 is appropriate to ensure that the uses that have been on site for 30+ years legally are allowed to occupy that site in the future. The visitor center has a lease with the city to long-term occupy the space and do the programming that they've been doing successfully for a number of years. And we're not intending to change that use at all. The current lease does also allow sublease to upstairs tenants. And so by changing the zoning, it ensures that whatever uses go into there into the future could still be used. The reason for the C1 zoning is simply because it's directly adjacent to C1 zoned properties right now. Those properties are largely residential and single family, but that is the zoning district in place now. So that's why I've recommended that zoning district. I'll just quickly go through our criteria for approval. To note, the code says that you may consider these factors, it doesn't say shall. So strictly speaking, they're not, if you don't meet all of them, you can still approve the zoning, and council can do the same. Conformance with the comprehensive plan, as my staff report suggests, the comprehensive plan's recommended land use is park, which obviously matches with the current zoning. But there are objectives in the comprehensive plan met with the current uses and the proposed zoning. Objectives to support development and redevelopment of the East End, where this is located, and objectives to support tourism and special events, which the visitor center does. Whether there have been material changes in the character of the neighborhood to justify the zoning, I would argue that the largest change happened on site, and it happened quite a long time ago, to where we converted the use from park to more community center, visitor center, historic, museum use. And so aligning the zoning today with historic use of the site is appropriate. I believe that the proposed rezoning tends to preserve and promote property values and is harmonious and compatible with surrounding land uses. No changes to the site are proposed. We don't anticipate new uses on the site into the future. We have a long-term lease that currently goes through 2030 with the Historical Society to operate the visitor center. So given that no changes are proposed, I believe these to be preserved. The 5th and 6th criteria, similarly, it asks whether it'll affect traffic congestion or impact public welfare. Given no changes are proposed to uses on site, I don't believe these will be impacted, but I will note that obviously the C1 zoning district is a lot more flexible than parks. So if the Historical Society, for whatever reason, did decide to leave, it could be redeveloped differently than a park. But that would require traffic studies and public processes to ensure that there won't be adverse impacts. So at this time, there won't be any impacts, but into the future, they'd be reviewed as relevant. And then finally, whether denial of the rezoning would impose an undue hardship. I'd argue that it could pose undue hardship on the city if we denied the rezoning, given that we want to ensure that, you know, we're in compliance with our own codes, that the visitor center can continue to operate, and you know, it's within the public interest to do so. So with all that said, staff recommends that you recommend approval of this requested rezoning from Parks and Recreation to commercial. And we have Jan from the Historical Society here. I don't think Jan was planning on presenting, but if you have any questions for her, she is happy to answer them, I think. So.
Did you want to present? No.
He's done an excellent job.
Okay.
Originally found the issue and now he's helping us solve it.
Any other public comment?
I don't have anyone online. I'm not sure if anyone else wants to. By public.
Commissioners have any questions? I can't believe we've missed it this long.
We were surprised.
No kidding, because I think I was on here when this all.
Well, and I had just assumed there must be some agreement or legal reason behind why it needs to get changed, but it seems like there's not really a good one.
Yeah. Well, and when you think of the other offices that have been in there, but then that doesn't really change anything, because those were allowed nonprofits, offices, what was it, watershed, stuff like that, okay. So with that, we'll close the public hearing at 6:26. And do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the requested rezoning application to rezone the city-owned property located at 2060 Minor Street from Park and Recreation to Commercial Zone 1. Commercial 1 with no conditions.
I'll second it.
You had 2 seconds there. Which one did you?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Roll call.
Chuck Howard,
Yes.
Don Reimer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ursula Kruzalegi.
Yes.
Chair Cindy Olson,
Yes.
Jefferson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
Yay, well, thank you. After 30 years.
Okay, we'll open now the second public hearing on ADA rafting and zip lining. And it is 6:27. And we'll start with staff report.
Okay, great. I am gonna try again to share my screen. I had issues last time, but we'll see. So, the applicant on this application, Duke Bradford, is here in attendance. I think he will provide testimonial at the end and be happy to answer questions, but, I will just start right in, and this is a kind of a lengthy staff report. I won't go into everything in incredible detail, but, I'll answer any questions that do come up. So the request is for a conditional use permit to allow employees of ABA rafting and zip lining to camp during this rafting season on the property that's known as the Silver Spruce Annexation, which is directly west of the city-owned Ballfields Park parcel. The applicant has a lease in place to be able to operate this employee campground on the site. And to note, ABA Rafting and Zip Lining also owns property off of Colorado 103. That is the headquarters. And that's also in city limits. There aren't any proposed changes to that parcel. So this property is a little strange from like a zoning perspective, because it was annexed as part of the Silver Spruce annexation in 1974 and put into a planned unit development, but there's no development on the parcel, and the terms of the agreement weren't met, so there's strictly speaking, not any permitted uses for the property at this time. Which is why, so there's not really, any uses by right, which is kind of strange. If we were going to develop anything permanently on the site, it would need to go through a rezoning process to get it into compliance with zoning and actually establish uses.
What is it zoned right now?
Well, it's technically zoned Silver Spruce PUD.
Okay.
We had thought it wasn't zoned at all, but technically it's this PUD, but the PUD is blank. So although it's considered that zoning district doesn't have any requirements or regulations or allowed uses. And so functionally speaking, unless you get a conditional use permit to allow a use, there's not a whole lot they can do right now with the property. And this map I drew in here kind of poorly, but just the subject of where this yellow circle, which you can't see that great from back there, I'm sure is where generally the campsite would be established. And then the blue line is vehicular access, which you see is off of 314, and you drive through the ball fields park. And then this red line would be potential pedestrian or bicycle access, which goes under an underpass and then into a couple blocks east of Safeway. And before I really dig into this, I put on the dais one public comment I received, and then also a referral from Kelly Fabian, who's the chief for the fire authority, who hadn't provided comments when the packet was due, but provided them afterwards. So I wanted to include those. So this staff report doesn't have his comments in it, but now we have them. So anyway, so conditional use per our code is allowed when a use is not specified as a use by right. This obviously is not for like a permanent conditional use on the property. It's kind of a temporary seasonal use that would end at the end of the rafting season. I won't go kind of deep at all into the long-term process for establishing permanent uses on site. I put that in the staff report to kind of say this is what we would envision it looking like if we established like a permanent use on the property that would be like employee camping. But for the purposes of the CUP, it isn't necessarily relevant, I suppose. But what the point I would make on that is that establishing a permanent use would require some permanent upgrades and infrastructure improvements to the site to meet all of the code long term. So I guess background wise, does anyone have questions yet, or should I just keep?
No.
Happy to keep rolling. So there's 3 criteria of approval to be met for approval of a conditional use permit. The first is that it conforms to the requirements of the municipal code and all other applicable provisions and development regulations adopted by the city. So I laid this out based on kind of the key requirements for development in the city. The first is water and wastewater. Our city code requires connection to water and public water, public sewer, unless there's either good cause as to why it should be exempted, or the property boundary is more than 100 feet from an existing line. So this property is definitely more than 100 feet from existing sanitary sewer lines. It's very close to 100 feet from an existing water line that kind of runs through the center of the west ball fields, kind of at the pitcher's mound, per Paul Crane, who's our public works superintendent. That's basically 100 feet exactly, give or take 10 or 20 feet. But what Paul has also said is that that line is only a 2-inch line, and it's really doesn't likely have capacity as it stands now to serve the ball fields property, the existing Forest Service property that's connected, and a use on this property. So, so for that reason, the applicant's proposal to provide potable water on site, it's proposed for 300 gallons of water to be on site. They're also proposing portable toilets for this season. And because of those reasons, for this one season use, it appears that this may be sufficient. As long as it's well managed and frequently, you know, the water is ensured that it's on site, well topped up, and the portable toilets are well maintained and pumped regularly. Access serving the property are standards and specifications for design and construction, would state that a driveway would need to be at least 12 feet wide, and a low volume road would have 2 12-foot drive lanes. I had surveys for the Ball Fields Park property and this property, and there are a few places where the current paved access is less than 12 feet. It varies between at a minimum like 10.5 feet, and parts, you know, on average, I would say it's right up around that 12 feet, but there's probably a few places where it's a little bit smaller than 12 feet. Fire authority has said that they can get an ambulance or a fire trucks back there if the need arose. So from a public health and safety standpoint, this access is sufficient. But you know, the note that I make is that essentially the average is just below that 12-foot limit. So you know, theoretically it could be paved to be more than 12 feet, but given the temporary nature of the use, and the fact that public health, safety, welfare could be maintained, I don't know, the concern from that public health, safety, welfare is not hugely impactful, I guess, but yeah, strictly speaking, that's code. From a parking standpoint, the code, you know, there's not a code parking standard for campground. So I said, you know, what's most similar in our parking requirements? I'd say, you know, maybe it would be efficiency units in a multifamily dwelling unit. I know it's not quite that same use, but it is people occupying a site overnight. And these are incredibly efficient units, I guess you could say. And so at that rate, it would require 1.25 spaces per unit. If we're saying there's 30 campsites, because the proposal is for up to 30 people, that would be 37.5 parking spaces. Application materials show that those could be met. The only note there is that off-street parking typically is required to be surfaced with asphalt or concrete. The proposal is for gravel, so they'd be improved spaces, but not paved. We could require that as a condition of approval, potentially. The one caveat might be that given that this is a temporary use and gravel parking might be sufficient for a 3-month project, whether we would want permanent paving on the site if it's not ultimately developed for that use long term. It's a question that I kind of like some input on. Trash and waste disposal will be provided on site, and the applicants mentioned that that'll be picked up weekly or thereabouts. With respect to noise, in the packet of materials, there was a proposed handbook that includes quiet hours. So staff believes that noise won't be a huge issue. Wildfire risk is obviously a huge concern for city as a whole, adjacent residential uses and the like. Kelly weighed in and had some discussion about how he doesn't necessarily see concern with a campfire pit. He recommended that it be gas fire rather than wood burning fire. But you know, I've proposed a condition that if this is approved, we should ensure that fire authorities sign off on any proposed fire pits, any proposed camp stove areas and the like. And potentially, given the concern, maybe it's worthwhile to just not allow open fires. Given that this is kind of a trial and there are concerns about wildfires, then the public comment brought that up. And Police Chief Busick also did mention that. So with all that, obviously there's a lot that goes into it. I think generally, this proposal is able to meet the majority of these regulations. Where there's potentially some question marks would be with the width of the access, paving of parking, and some of that wildfire risk and hazard mitigation. Certainly would have to meet fire ban requirements and the like. The next section deals with the comprehensive plan. This site's identified as mixed use and or parks. If this, I would say that employee housing and campground uses could both meet a mixed use designation. The comprehensive plan, does seek solutions to housing affordability and housing accessibility. This is, temporary one season request, but there's obviously concerns and some issues that come up with housing our seasonal workforce. And so this does address that seasonal workforce in a way that instead of folks just going down into the Forest Service, down some 4-wheel drive road, or just, kind of legally camping somewhere and the associated headaches with that, this is the one place that can be managed and regulated. And so in that way, it does provide, it appears a potentially a safer place for seasonal employees to operate for this season, for the rafting employees of APA Rafting Zipline. It is also proposed to be incredibly affordable. So staff believes that as long as the proposed infrastructure that will make it safe, healthy, not impactful to local adjacent uses is provided and well maintained, it could help further that goal on housing in the short term. So third one, proposed use will not result in impacts to adjacent properties. More so than uses which are permitted by right in the zoning district. This one's a little tough to discuss because there isn't really zoning or allowed uses on this property, so it's hard to compare this use to no permitted use. But with that in mind, we can consider what other potential uses there might be on site: multifamily housing, mixed use housing, potentially commercial. I did a kind of a brief analysis of the proposed use of the site being 30 employees. This would be comparable to like a mid-density residential development as far as people coming and going to the site. Our average household size in our comprehensive plan was 2.2 residents. So I just, easy calculation to say that's like on par with 13 residential units. So I kind of did an analysis based on that. So primary impacts would be to the adjacent ball fields park parcel from people coming and going across the site, and then potentially the properties under the underpasses. Folks maybe walk through that neighborhood east of Safeway. That I didn't really go into that east of Safeway neighborhood at all, but given that it's pedestrian and bikes, that seems to have a pretty minor impact. With respect to the ball fields park, the city has a lease agreement with the rec district, and obviously they do programming in that park. And so ensuring that those uses are compatible and don't have impacts on park users is important. I think the big impact is likely vehicle trips across the site on the 12-foot wide drive lane that's not been improved further than that. Other conflict might be folks walking down and using the park, and folks potentially interacting with people who are using the park. The lease agreement that the applicant provided seemed to do a pretty good job of attempting to mitigate that. Another way that we've thought could be a good way to mitigate some of these potential impacts would be to require contact information on site, primary contact and a backup contact who can respond to issues quickly. The applicants mentioned that there will be someone on site who's kind of considered a manager, refers to it as a mayor. And so, I propose a condition of approval that if there are impacts, that we'd be able to contact them quickly to be able to respond to those issues. During this referral period, I referred it out to police department, to fire authority. As I mentioned, I also talked with Cameron from the rec district, who's here tonight as well. Chief Busick did express some concerns about the scale of the proposal, given that it's not been attempted here. It's been attempted elsewhere, but not here. A smaller trial might be easier to maintain. He had some concerns about enforcement and how, resources that might be called upon if there's a lot of complaints and things where sheriff or police departments responding to a lot of calls. Having that 24/7 contact might mitigate that a little bit. He talked about needing an address for the property, which we could work with the applicant to get an address for that for emergency services response and the like. And then he had another concern to say, if there's a lot of violations, we really want to be able to revoke this. So, we proposed a condition saying that city council can revoke this if in accordance with code. I also did talk to planning department staff from Chaffey County and Clear Creek County. They both have regulations that manage employee and seasonal camping. Neither of them had anything negative to say about their programs. And obviously their programs are codified and they've been in place for a long time. And so they have strict regulations that you have to follow that are in the code, which we don't. But they mentioned that in the many years they've been doing this, they've never had a violation. They've never had to close a employee camping operation. And although it's not a long-term solution to housing problems, it is a short-term solution for these seasonal employees. With all of that, I didn't provide a recommendation either in favor or against, because I think there are some things that we really need input from planning commission on. I think generally it can meet the health, safety, and welfare concerns and quality of life concerns that I think are reasonable. Fire risk, sanitation and water, trash and noise, all of that. I think there's a reasonable plan in place to address all those. But, as I mentioned, there's a few things that if you're following really strictly the code, these could be easily improved as a permanent use, but for a short-term temporary use may not be reasonable to implement quickly. The water and sewer, the access and the like. So I proposed a number of conditions to kind of ensure that these health, safety, welfare, and all that in the municipal code are met. It's pretty lengthy. Some of these may have been addressed with fire authority's comments, but we proposed these just to ensure that all of these potential concerns are hopefully addressed. I'm not gonna read them all out since there are 13 of them, but these are our initial draft of conditions. So with that, I end my report and I'll answer any questions and then we can pass it along to Duke.
Where, you said it goes under the road there, the tunnel part, not tunnel, I mean,
Yeah, it's kind of an.
doesn't it have that? No motorized vehicles on it.
Yes. it's-
I guess my thought is like if people would have, I don't know, a little moped or a motorcycle or something motorized,
Mhm.
which could be. Do we allow motorized on it? Like right now we're walking, we don't.
No.
So that would be just, I mean, I
Except
just,
for service vehicles.
right.
Right.
So I think somewhere where it says no motorized, just so they're aware of that.
Right, like we should add signage potentially, or,
Something in it that just
something
says,
maybe in the-
people be aware of the city policy on no motorized vehicles on those walking paths. I mean, I just can see.
I think that
something
is
like-
important both at the tunnel end, the west end, but also the east end, because you're gonna have more vehicles coming into that property that may not know that's really not a roadway. That's a share of the road with the trail, spur trail there. And vehicles, motorized vehicles there should be a sign saying beyond this point, no motorized vehicles. So once you get onto the AVA site, vehicles aren't allowed on that path beyond that point.
Right.
So.
There's probably more questions and
Oh, yeah.
stuff.
As far as the fire thing, I think the campfire ban should conform with the county's fire ban if it gets real dry.
Mhm.
So if they propose a, countywide fire ban, it takes care of the campground too.
They're saying they're gonna do it.
Yeah, they're saying in this that they would do that.
But yeah, I think certainly if fires are allowed, then it would have to conform to that. Because otherwise then, because typically, we align our fire ban for the city with the county. So I think that would be, even if we didn't put a condition of that in place, as with any other property, we'd have to conform with that.
The only other quick question, and then we can let Duke do his, is it says tents or camper vans. What's considered camper vans?
That's a good question. I might cede that question to the applicant,
Okay.
because on the proposed concept plan, there was a space that had mentioned camper van parking, but I know in the lease agreement, it was originally mentioned tents only. And another thing to note is
I
that
did notice that.
the applicant mentioned that there'd be constructed tent pads on site, which would, I think, be helpful in kind of creating a more detailed plan showing here's sort of all the campsites, so that if there's emergency service response or whatnot, they know particularly where to go.
Right, because you think of, that's what I noticed too. It talked about tents and lease, but then there's camper vans, and then it's camper vans. I think of it as those vans, but then I also think of, a lot of people have trucks with campers on, pickups with campers. So why would that not be allowed if a camper van was? So I guess clarifying that, but does the applicant want to present at this point? Yeah, and Wonder will start again.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Duke Bradford, 116, Old Lake Terrace, Breckenridge, Colorado.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate you making the time. My name is Duke Bradford. I own and operate AVA Rafting and Ziplining here in Idaho Springs. We've been here since like about 2022. We've been rafting. And over that time, we years ago bought the old doctor's office and converted it to a rafting company. And since that time, we've grown here in the community, and it's been really a great experience. But with that, as rafting's become much more popular here, we have been faced with some user conflicts, particularly with our seasonal employees. Where they would come, they would camp, we would have problems. Ultimately, there was a lot of frustration with the local community. We would hear about it on the street, people that work here and live here. So we would always looking for a place of solution, something that we could say, okay, let's take care of this problem. We certainly had people that were unregulated camping. Some of them probably are employees, some of them probably not, but they were, they just weren't respecting the community the way we wanted them to respect it. And essentially we were guilty by association. So AVA had an opportunity to enter into a lease with this property. And we decided to do that in hopes that we could create a more regulated camp. Where we would have someone that was responsible, would be accountable to our staff, and that where if there was a problem, that we could address it. We had had a lot of success with this in Buena Vista. We run a campground there, employee campground, that Dylan referred to in that particular program. And we've done it for 20 years. So we thought this was an ideal piece of property. It had no neighbors. We could isolate the situation and then we could try it. And so we're here today and from planning to say, can we try? Can we try to do this and see what this feels like? We are optimistic that we can do it as we've done it in Buena Vista, but it is, it is a little unorthodox kind of where it is, but it's hard to find a place to do the camping. Right now in the county, they do it and they kind of do it out on the highway and things like that. We really like this property because it was isolated. We could fence it. We could really make it so it wasn't something that was an eyesore to the community, and it was something we could control. And so that's kind of how we arrived here today. And Dylan's been great to work with. I haven't gone through this process very often, but so I'm here to answer questions. I just was kind of giving you the why we're here today. And thank you.
Okay, what's the camper vans in the tents?
Oh, yeah,
and then-
thank you. Camper vans are, and I probably should have said, a lot of these guys, they come in, like you said, trucks with campers. Well, it's not enough space. We're like, no, they have to be small, like if you're going to camping vehicle. So we wanted them to be able to do that because a lot of them live in their vans, essentially. So we wanted to make room for them, but the majority of our things were tent camps. We wanted, people do both. They either sleep in their cars or they set up a tent and live out of that. But because parking was limited, we were like, you have to be one or the other. We can't bring like a camper and then a car. There's just not enough space for that. So that's kind of was the premise for that. We had a little bit of room for about 10 spots that could be car campers if you were one of those people that drive and live in your car. Or then we would have tent camping spots, permanent structures where people would set up tents.
Okay, so the idea is, because you talked about, here's where the vehicles park, and then they walk into their camps.
Mm-hmm.
But so you're gonna have that, but then the camper vans or the pickup trucks are gonna be in a different area where that's where they park. And they might be in and out with their vehicles, because.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They could be. What we hope is to bike, because we have a problem with parking at our facilities, right? So we don't really want them to bring those, we need those for guests to park. We don't need our employees driving up there. It doesn't work for us either at 103. So we want them to pedal up and use the bicycle opportunity.
And just for reference, I calculated out the distance from the campsite to the property. It's about 1.2 miles. So if you went under the highway and then walked along Minor Street and then cut
Walked
through.
or riding bikes is great. Yeah.
Can I do a follow-up question based on your question?
Yeah.
So you were saying that you are thinking about having 10 parking spots that could be for camper vans. Would that be like you'll have 10 spots, or depending how many spots you fill, you will decide if you add camping tent pads?
Well, we'd be capped under our 30, right? So you'd have 10 and 20, essentially. That's how we would look at it.
So you will have 10 and 20. So if you have only 5 people that is camping on cars, you will just give up those 5 spots.
Yeah. Exactly. So we've capped at 30, and which is minimum we have. And I don't know what we'll exactly have, but that's what we have room for. That's what we figured, 10 to car camp, 20 to camp.
Okay, now, the last time I was down there, it's tiered. The property, so you drive up. Which level are you on, the bottom tier or the top tier?
We have
For
2
both.
tiers, you're right.
Okay.
We have both.
And it circles around and drops in, okay, I
Yeah.
guess, Where's the conflict on events that are down there because of
We're,
parking?
we're west,
Rapid grass.
we're
comes to
quite a
mind.
bit west. There's a whole storage, they're storing all those pylons, I guess they're
Mhm.
pylons.
And
So-
I don't know if you, that's
Oh.
helpful to you.
Yeah, so if you have the pylons and everything
That's it
down,
down
we're
here,
gonna be up where the 97 is to the left, basically, yes, we're in that, so we're even a little higher than that, but that's our area. But basically, you're right, that's it. So that's, so we won't really impact that area or parking down by the ballparks. Cause you'll have all the storage right now from the CDOT project in between us and the ballparks and the events.
And that's all staying there.
Yeah, I think it is. I don't think
And
they're
then,
coming
so
up.
it's up above that.
It's above that, correct?
Okay. Yeah, I looked at that map and I couldn't tell how far up it
Let
is.
me see, so the
elevation.
utility tower is right here, kind of in the middle of this red area. So if you know where the power lines are, it's kind of at that height
Okay,
as opposed to down closer to the ball fields. That's the only point of reference I can really think of is the power lines that cut across there.
and then what type of fencing were you looking at?
I was thinking that, sort of that kind of like temp fence that was green, you know, that you see around construction site, the nice one that you can't see through. Because of where that property sits, it sits up. So if you put a fence around it, green, so it would blend with the area. So the topography sets up nicely. So even if you parked up there, close, we could close it off and it would be more private, I think, for the people that are camping, but as well as for what people could see.
And fence in the porta potties?
Yeah, well, the porta potties will be up a little higher, closer to keep the walking cameras, yeah.
Yeah.
So they'll go there, and so for now, yeah, we thought trucking and water, porta potties, you know, would be the best. It's not ideal, but we utilize them at our other campgrounds, and they work, well. So as long as you have people servicing, of course, and the trash as well, you know, we'll have bear proof. We have the same problem in Memphis, so the bears they're a challenge, so we definitely have to look after our trash.
Bears are a challenge here, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's an interesting proposal. I mean, it's a solution for some temporary housing. It is, yeah. Okay, any other questions quick for the applicant, and we'll go to public comment and then more of the commissioners' questions.
Yeah, I had a question. So it says the use of generators prohibited during quiet hours. So they'll be allowed during non-quiet hours, is that right?
Till 10 PM.
Okay.
We've historically done that at our other campground. I don't think has to be, there's quite a bit of highway noise up there.
Right.
So I don't think it's really that impactful. I mean, no one could hear it. But yeah, they're kind of obnoxious, really, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that usually governs itself, you know, so yes, but 10 PM is the cutoff.
Okay, yeah, just because especially, if anybody's heard it, but like when we had like the festival over at the ball field last fall, noise really reverberates off the opposite canyon wall. And I know because I live right there, so I just kind of like thinking about that as well, how much that noise will reverberate off the north wall over there. But you set up until at 10 PM, so, okay. And then as far as electricity, you said there's gonna be lighting.
Yeah.
But how else is power gonna be provided after hours?
We won't have power. I mean, I think we have power to the corner. I don't think we've made any infrastructure improvements to get the power. There is a pole there. We haven't actually done anything. We weren't thinking of bringing power to this area.
Okay. All right.
That's interesting. I feel like having no power would definitely add trips to back and forth to the area. You said that you will be controlling the area. How would you control it?
Typically, we have a mayor on site, that's an employee, that runs it, and, we meet weekly as a staff, so we sort of take ownership of it. So part of our weekly meeting discusses employee housing, or employee campground, and then the mayor is accountable to the group. You know, what we found over the years is most people want a quiet place to live, so there's a level of, once you set the infrastructure with the mayor, he or she answers to the manager, the general manager. And those numbers are all going to be made available. And so we take essentially ownership of it. If you read the packet, you can lose your job. It's very important to us to have housing for our staff, and so it's taken very seriously, as it is in the Arc Valley. So if people don't comply, we ask them to leave. Not only do they have to leave the campground, they have to leave their job. So it's a pretty big deal. So that's how we enforce it, with the fact that they're employed by our company. And our company is names on the line. Obviously, if you guys choose to do this, we're accountable for this. So that's, we take that seriously, and we take the camping seriously, because it is so important for our seasonal staff so we can operate.
What's your procedures when someone just leaves and leaves trash or whatever, either halfway through the season or at the end of the season? Like, who takes charge? Is it you guys?
Oh, yeah, it's our property. We're leasing the property. So we're taking ownership of the property and the responsibility for the property 100%. And so we clean it up, and if they can't do it themselves, then we'll do it for them. I think we take a deposit too, so we'll just keep their deposit and clean it up ourselves. And then historically, every fall, there's staff that stays on that wants hourly, and we have them clean up our facilities. And that's part of, we have a bigger challenge in Buena Vista because we're on the highway. So the public sees us. So we've really had to stay up with that particular issue. So we're used to that issue, and where it is, it does take some work, but we're used to doing that.
You have a pretty extensive lease agreement. I mean,
Yeah.
it's got a lot of,
It's
very well done.
Oh, thank you. It's evolved over 20 years.
Yeah.
We've been camping them for 20 years, and so you sort of add on.
Yeah, every
Yeah,
time you
I
have an
mean,
incident, you
yeah,
add
exactly.
something to it,
So
like,
it'd be
okay, we'll
"Yeah,
cover
gosh, I
that
never
one.
thought of that." All of a sudden, we need to put that in the lease.
Yeah. Any other questions for Duke?
Sorry, one more.
Sure.
So on the rules and regulations for the lease agreement, it says only tents are allowed, but then there's provisions from the map for RV camps.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's just something
Just
we
have to adjust
we
it?
have to adjust.
Okay.
That's fair criticism.
I think in our contingencies,
Like there's an
for the motions,
inconsistency
we would add that they modify this to the language being.
Okay, in the vehicle limit for camper vans is still gonna be 20 feet, the length.
Yeah,
excuse me.
20 is the max as we put together. Okay. Really just for cars. What we can't have is someone drop off a 30-foot.
That's what I was worried about,
But that's what we have, so we can't do that. There's just not the space for that. So, and then when they do that, it brings another car. So we're like, yeah, that's not, there's just not enough space. That's possible.
Don't you have a difficult time with the no cut policy?
Yeah, at
Yeah.
times you do. But you'd be surprised, what I had 3 workers comp at our other ones, because they did have dogs and they bit our employees, and they're of course like, oh, period work, right? So then we're like, bill pass.
Yeah.
So it's tough, but it's not for everybody. I mean, the camping isn't for everybody, it's an option. And you're right, some people can't do it for their circumstances, but it does offer something that controls it. We're not having camp behind Safeway, or wherever. It's been a headache for a long. I think we all know it's been a headache for a long time. So hopefully this alleviates it to a degree.
Jefferson, could you point out the piece you were talking about, the consistency? I'm trying
It's
to
in
find it.
his lease
Oh,
agreement.
sorry, second page of the lease agreement, under policies, procedures and expectations. This one is listed under rules and regulations, where only tents are permitted.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it's because it says walk-in tent camping. All
Yeah.
sites are walk-in tent camping.
But what the discrepancy is, there are cars allowed, right?
There are gonna be camper vans
Yeah.
allowed,
Right.
that's what you're showing on the.
Okay.
Where'd it go?
And so I think the change would be that there are 10 sites, I guess you could say, that are camper van sites, and the rest would be walk-in tent camping.
It should be camper vans, well, campers /vans. Okay, camper vans, not one word.
Yeah, I guess you could say like
Because it could be,
self-contained vehicles that or under 20 feet or something to that effect that are operable and move, like, it's not just a trailer that you put on site, but.
Right.
Right, so it says not allowing trailers, so, yeah.
Okay, I have one more question, sorry about that. What is your long-term plan for housing?
I mean, ideally, we develop camping and it would be a win, right? We could prove that we could camp and we could do it responsibly. As we've done before in North Valley, and, we've done that successfully for 20 years in that area, and, I think it can be done here. I think the spot we have is good, and obviously I wouldn't be here if I didn't. So I think there's hopefully we're asking for a trial period. If that falls through, I think it's back to the drawing board. It's really hard to buy property. We're a seasonal business. It's a small business, and so you don't have unlimited resources. So you have to find a niche that works. I think the camping thing for seasonal employees is a good option. As Dylan says, it's economical. People can do it. It's a situation where it's really a burden on the company, because it's not something that obviously you make money at or anything. It costs you money to subsidize a campground. So that's I think in this industry, that's as good as it gets. I suppose you could work something out where you share with Loveland State Ski Resort. If you could do a sort of swap 6 months, I think that would be a great solution. I haven't seen that opportunity. I certainly welcome it. But for now, camping, due to the season, and it being warm, camping seems to be the best option.
I'm with Loveland Ski.
Yeah. See, that'd be good. See, so I would welcome something like that on a 6 month.
So if this was to get approved, you will do this trial, and assuming everything goes fine, you would pursue turning this into a permanent campground?
We'd look
For you guys, would it be just for ABA? Would you open it for the rest of the rafting people?
We found in running these things, they have to be your employee. If they're not, you just don't have enough control over them. Problems arise, there's just not. So it would have to be employed. I personally would not run that work part just for our employees. There's just too many variables. Having done it this long, they have to be employees. We have probably 50 employees here in Idaho Springs. Give or take, it's a little seasonal, but that's the reality. Not all of them need camping, so that's not. Some can commute, some live here in Newtown. So some have accommodations, but there's always a need for 30, people that are coming and working here in the summer.
Now in here, you stated also that you're working something out with the rec district with using the rec center.
Oh, we give them all passes.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's how you give them passes.
We give them
Okay.
passes because we want them to, take advantage of rec center. It's one of the purposes of working. We really want them to go there and take a shower. Be a part of that. But that is part of our program. Yes, we do that. We do that regardless, and we've done that for years. We'll continue to do that.
Okay, any other questions for Duke? We'll move on to public comment. Okay. We may call you back up.
Oh, okay.
Do we have anybody on for public comment?
Nobody signed up.
Nobody signed up. Cameron, did you want to sign up?
Yeah, I thought as a referral, I needed to sign up, or I needed to speak.
You don't have to sign in, because that's for non-agenda items,
Okay,
but come up and I will swear you in and we
Okay.
can talk.
You don't need to speak also if you don't want to.
I would like to,
Okay.
thank you though.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Cameron Marlin, 269 Zip Trail, Idaho Springs, Colorado, 804.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the heads up on all of this and the communication. It's been nice to work in partnership with the planning commission on all of this. I definitely think there's an impact to CCMRD or a potential impact. First and foremost, we're willing to provide conditional support for the request, but that would be assuming complete compliance with all the local laws, the conditions that Dylan mentioned, CCMRD policies, and non-interference with any CCMRD functions. We have some pretty real concerns about what this could look like for CCMRD. And a lot of those relate to safety. I'm glad that we talked extensively about the fire risk. I think that's a really big one. Parking and that tight road, you know, that if an emergency vehicle did need to get up there, well, what if there's like 50 cars and it's rapid grass and it's really difficult to get through there? I think that's a real concern. There's kids that are running around. Sometimes vehicles travel quickly and it would be horrible for there to be an incident with the vehicle. I'm happy to hear that there would be a no pet policy because I do worry about dogs running around up at that space. There is no overnight supervision of the ball field area, and I do worry about fences being climbed and property being damaged, and I would want to make sure that AVA would be responsible for any and all repairs, coordination and also cost. The lack of water, we are working in partnership with the Forest Service to make sure that they have water and that we can also irrigate our fields. And so I just, you know, when Dylan said it would be adequate if it was properly managed, I just worry, like, what if it isn't properly managed and then our grass dries up? I just would want to make sure that that didn't happen. I would want to make sure or try to prevent any kind of unpleasant interaction between a community member and a raft guide. I don't think I need to go into greater detail on that potential risk. But those are our concerns. I mean, safety is the big one. Parking is a big one. Water availability and everything else that I just mentioned. But overall, we are willing to offer support of your proposal and try to be happy neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other public?
I don't see anyone on
Can I
here.
come up to you?
Yes.
Since I've just had to be here.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Jen Boland, 175 Divide View Drive, Idaho Springs, Colorado.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I just am very concerned about fire. Are you going to have open fire pits of any sort, or how are they going to do any cooking on site?
Cooking on site, they'd have a common area. There's a big cement structure out there. We thought that would be the best place to be able to do that area. And so we would do that. I think we'd probably stick with what the fire chief was suggesting, in that probably just propane. So we just do gas. So we just get away from the fire altogether and just take the risk, because we share in that risk, right? Because we are essentially AVA as a company is on the line for that. So we understand that risk and we don't want it. There's certainly gas fireplaces they can utilize from time to time, but we have a common area that's in there, that's an area that's away from the trees they can utilize. And we'll make that area common for them. But no fires. I think that's the direction we'd like to go.
That's good.
Because I think that's the biggest thing we've heard throughout. So when Bill and I were talking, like, you know, why not just take this off the table and they can do a propane fireplace.
Is your mayor or overseer going to have specific hours that they're on premise while these other residents are on premise?
Yes, the mayor has to live there.
Okay, he lives there and
Yes.
he's, as his job, is he there 24 hours a day or?
Yeah, pretty much. I think there's a mayor and there's I think they call it a lieutenant. So there's two people to address that issue. And like I said, we have a weekly meeting, so it's discussed every week. That's a topic that's discussed. And so with the rest of our river trips, as well as everything that's going on. So I think we have pretty good accountability. Over the years, we've been proven to be able to, when an accident, things happen, police have gotten called, things of that nature, or had to show up for medicals. We have a medical, we were able to facilitate that. So I feel like we could do it. The mayor is sort of two people in there that have some responsibility. Sure, there could be always a time maybe they aren't there, but we just haven't really seen that happen. for the time we've been doing it. So I think we can do it responsibly.
I would just be a little concerned because being young people, they're gonna be out there having a good time when they're not working. And for the safety of everyone, they need supervision, so, okay. Well, that was my questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, commissioners, any other questions? I guess we would add to the conditions, no fires. And then another question I had was buses. You guys have buses that come around that you go with the zip lines, or are you guys just using pickups?
You just use trucks. We
Okay.
use those open trucks and go up the back way.
And they're not gonna be going up and down,
No,
the
they
traffic.
didn't access this area at all.
okay?
There'll be no commercial, our commercial business won't be.
That all will still be stored at the headquarters.
Everything.
3, I believe, you know.
Cindy, just trying to get these conditions in order here.
Oh,
I have written down signage
Yeah.
stating there's no motorized vehicles.
Yeah.
I have addressing the camper van discrepancy in the lease agreement, which I think that can just be subject to the approval of the city attorney, so we don't have to give them exact language at this moment. I'm also seeing in Dylan's proposed conditions, number 4, there's some X marks the spot areas to be included if, I guess you guys want to include something, I mean, you could always punt that to the council.
And I'll mention, I put that in there, that campsites be a minimum distance from like trees and wooded areas and have like a free of vegetation area. That's something that is in the Clear Creek County regulations, that they say you have to be have a certain radius around your campsite that's not like full of grass and weeds and things that could catch fire potentially. But that wasn't a fire authority recommendation necessarily, so it may or may not be an appropriate or necessary condition.
Well, any of the verbiage that's got the fires, it says cooking and fires shall only occur on non-vegetated surfaces, because you're gonna take out fires anyway. Cooking is camp stoves and in your communal area,
Right.
yeah.
Negative.
Are you getting that, Nick?
Yeah, so you want
It's on
to,
number 4, but the minimum distances, is that common? You said that's in the counties.
Yeah,
Are you guys looking at that, number 4?
Yeah.
I might quickly, I have this, pretty easily available, let me try to find it,
Maybe we should cross that fire, because there's no fires, right?
so there
Which
is
is
another
great.
added condition of no fires.
Yep.
Okay,
Are we okay with fire in like a propane fire, but no like natural fire? That, you know what I'm talking about?
You mean those
Like
big
an
propane
open
things?
flame,
Yeah,
like,
open
yeah.
flame, that's what the fire chief
Yeah.
was suggesting, go to that. So then they can have a little fire, but it's one of those ones that, runs off the. it's
Like
a
those solo or
Yeah,
whatever
those
those,
solo
yeah.
deals, and they have
Yeah.
propane.
I think what we're looking for is no fires with wood.
Yeah, no natural fire, just
Yeah.
making sure, yeah.
Which then do you need number 4 with the vegetation and all that?
Yeah, I thought I read that there was a pad for the communal area for the fire, is that right?
Yeah.
Specifically where it's going to be?
Yeah, we had a spot designated, and we could work with the fire department, they're gonna have to come check it out anyway. To make sure that whatever we're doing is in compliance.
Yeah,
And
what,
then we can only use gas.
What I might recommend maybe is just removing the first two sentences from number 4 and say Clear Creek Fire Authority shall sign off on the location of campsites, fire pits and cooking areas. Like keep that just to ensure that someone from fire comes and, gives the okay, and as long as all that, as long as it meets their requirements, maybe that's.
Yeah, it seems like that part is more for if you were gonna allow campfires at each campsite. So there's no vegetation around, which, yeah, you don't want that.
So maybe we can just remove that whole.
But the word fire pits should probably say gas fire pits. It's-
I think we're fine just
Okay.
by saying no natural fires.
Okay.
Just trying to keep this.
Well, we're looking at
not
number
complicated.
4.
Yeah, I got
Okay,
you.
okay.
So number 4 deleted down to the first sentence now being Clear Creek Fire Authority.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions?